This class is concerned with types of organisation, and specifically we will look at the idea of a flat versus a tall organisation and the attributes of each. However, before we get on to that, let's have some slides on organisational structure. Now, there are many definitions of the term organisational structure, and I'm going to set out two here, but I'm not going to discuss them in detail. Here's one by Robert Duncan. Now I suggest you stop the video and copy this out and read it over and see what you can determine from this, what you understand by it. It's a very straightforward definition. What it does is it simply links organisation to many of the key roles and many key functions within the organisation itself. But talk it over. It could be a good seminar topic, as indeed is this one by the Open University. Again, stop the video and write it down, research it, and again it could form the basis of a good seminar topic. And again, it just looks at many aspects of the business and how they are linked within the structure. So it talks about, well, as you can see, how the organisation, how the activities and responsibilities are allocated and regulated and coordination and so on. So have a look at those two definitions, the Duncan definition and the Open University definition, and make notes yourself and research them. As for what we're going to do here, well, the various definitions reflect the type of organisation and its purpose. Large corporations differ from small local businesses. In fact, we can imagine a whole variety of possibilities here. Very large, large, not so large, moderately small, small, different types of business, different technologies, different approaches to production, different ideas about structure and organisation. So it's not surprising that we have a large number of definitions, because they're trying to address all of the various possibilities that arise, especially considering the great variety of sizes and technologies and product that are being produced. According to Huczynski and Buchanan, two very famous writers in the area, the structure of an organisation signals the expected behaviour of members. So if we take the elements of structure, and for a start just look at what it's concerned with. Well, it's concerned with the allocation of resources within the organisation, how work is allocated and how resources are allocated within the organisation. And also how all of the resources, the workers, the capital and so on, how they are coordinated efficiently. Now these two are key points in the structure. These two indicate the essentials of structure. The structure involves the allocation of tasks and responsibility within the organizations. So the structure must be associated and show how tasks and responsibilities are allocated. The clear specification of jobs and roles. Structure must show exactly who's doing what, what's required, who's allocated to it. Setting out the framework. Setting out the whole framework for production and operation. Designing the most efficient hierarchical structure. What is the best way of organizing the business? Setting out a plan for that. And deciding responsibility boundaries for each manager. Who looks after what, and where the overlap could be, how to reduce it so as to reduce conflict, and also to ensure a smooth transfer from one department to the next. So a nice delineation of departments. The outcomes, well, the outcomes are a clear organisational chart, so everyone knows how the business is structured. Clear job descriptions, everyone knows what's required of them. An efficient bureaucracy and administration. Efficient bureaucracy and administration means that the paperwork and the instructions and the channels of communication are efficient. That the messages don't get mixed up as they're being passed down the line, so that there is confusion and inefficiency as a result. And there's also clear company rules and policies. So structure is concerned with these 3 areas. It's concerned with the 2 at the start, what it involves, and the outcomes. Now let's go on to talk about the flat and tall organisation structures that I mentioned at the outset. Well, flat organisational structure could be not completely flat. It may be of the form we've got here. Difficult to find the words to describe it, but perhaps relatively flat. If I just put the cursor on the screen, we have the top management, we have some sort of middle management, and we have production here at the bottom. Over here we have a much more hierarchical structure. This would be a tall organizational structure. So we have flat and tall. And here we have top management, we have a layer of management here, quite senior management, followed by a layer of perhaps middle management and a layer of line managers at the bottom. But it really critically depends on what's being produced, how big the organization is, as to whether it's a tall or a flat organizational structure. Small businesses perhaps do not have the personnel or the inclination or the desire to have tall organizational structures. They don't have the resources to fund it either. So it depends critically on what's being produced, how big the business is, and so on. Let's talk about the flat organization structure for a start. It has a small hierarchy. This means a small number of levels of authority and organization. So it's relatively flat. Generally speaking, communications tend to be efficient in this organization. It's not bureaucratic and no strict procedures and policies to follow. Flat organizations, the workers are very close to the top management and they can communicate with the top management very easily. So there's no need for bureaucracy, and there's no need for channels of communication, formal channels of communication. The top management are on the shop floor all the time, or most of the time, and can be easily found, and so communications is easy. That's the point. And decentralized structure, which means that decision making may be given to managers throughout the organization. Once the senior management have trust in the management below them, they give them authority to do it. They know the managers personally. They see them every day and talk to them, and they know what they're capable of and what they're doing and their ideas, and so it's easy to delegate because there is knowledge of the managers. So we have an informal organizational structure that allows networks to develop, and these may facilitate innovation and greater team spirit. Small organizations tend to have this. They tend to have a greater team spirit. They identify with the organization. It's a small community, and the workers relate to the product, and they know each other, and if they see better ways of doing it, they will communicate it easily to the management because the management will be accessible. So that's a very positive thing about flat organizations. The disadvantages of flat organizations, well, there are fewer promotion possibilities. In small organizations with a very flat organization, because it's a flat organization, there's nowhere for workers to be promoted. There's only one layer of management perhaps, and so workers on the bottom layer can't be promoted, or it's unlikely they can be promoted unless one of the managers on the next layer retires or leaves or whatever. So promotion is not easy within this type of organization. And individual managers may have wide responsibilities, not just to look after a group of workers making a particular object, performing a particular function, not just to look after them, but perhaps also to look after other parts of the business, because there's nobody else to do it, perhaps. So individual managers may have very wide responsibility for different aspects of the business. Managers have a large span of control. In other words, a large number of employees to report to a manager. And this makes supervision more difficult. A large span of control means that the manager may have many workers report to him or her. And that means the manager may be stressed. The manager may have to work extremely hard to deal with the issues raised by the workers and also have wide responsibilities within the organization. So these are disadvantages of the flat organization. Now the tall organization, well, fewer employees report to each manager and therefore their span of control is narrow, which means the manager is able to make better decisions, get to know the workers better, and get involved with the detailed work more so than the flat case we talked about earlier. There is a large number of hierarchies, a large number of levels in the tall organization. And there's a centralized control. Managers at the top of the hierarchy are most powerful. So it's hierarchical, and the ones at the top control all of the organization below them. So it's a centralized structure. But there are more opportunities for promotion, mostly because of number two, the large number of levels and hierarchies. So workers at one level can apply to be promoted to the next level or whatever. Whereas in the flat organization, there were no levels. There were very few levels, perhaps only one. So it's almost impossible to be promoted. Whereas in a tall organization, workers could be promoted. So workers on the very bottom on the shop floor could be promoted to section leader, and later on to be a foreman, and perhaps even again on to manager of a small department, and so on, and can be promoted up the organization. A formal organization, work and project groups designed by senior management with a view to maximizing efficiency. So it is quite formal. There is a bureaucracy, there is a set communication channel, there are top-down rules, and the whole idea is to maximize efficiency, to reduce costs, and to compete effectively in the marketplace. But it is quite formal, a formal structure with all of the disadvantages and the advantages of that. Now the disadvantages of a tall organization, well, Now, the disadvantages of a toll organisation. Generally, toll organisations tend to be bureaucratic with strict rules, procedures and reporting channels. And that may mean workers become alienated, they don't identify with the organisation. There's no way there's wider participation in decision making or in involvement. So some people may feel that their voice is not being heard, so they become disengaged. Communication becomes complex and inefficient due to the large hierarchy and many divisions. So the communication channels themselves may be very, very complex, not just from the top going through the organisation, but going sideways, going from one department to the next, and from one department to a different functional department. For example, going from one production department to accounts, perhaps dealing with some issue on pay. So the communications channels can be very, very complex, and there is scope there for confusion and inefficiency. Let's have a few words about small businesses. These tend to have flat organisation structures because they're small. They tend to be flexible and have informal structures. Flexible because the manager, who's perhaps the owner, is involved with the workers, and decision making can be done through consultation and with the involvement of the workers. Bureaucratic structures are not able to respond to environmental changes as quickly as flat structures. Flat structures, small businesses in particular, can adjust to environmental changes, changes in the market, changes in some aspect of the market. They can change perhaps quite quickly, whereas large bureaucratic organisations, they take time to have the changes, to go through all the processes that are required, and to finally tool up and start producing for the new situation. So small businesses tend to be much more flexible. Large businesses, well, flat organisational structures are inefficient for large organisations. The span of control becomes too wide for managers to cope with. In a large organisation, the same manager, one manager, may have, in a large organisation, may have 100 people reporting to him or her. Well, that's not possible. The manager is just a human being and would become extremely stressed dealing with lots of issues of that nature. So the best way to organise it is hierarchical, to have the manager and to have people under the manager who will solve many of the problems before they get to the manager. Tall structures may become too tall. And what I mean by too tall is that there are too many layers within the organisation, so that decision making becomes complex. At the same time, they have to be tall enough to stop managers from becoming stressed out, and to keep the span of control under control, to keep the span of control reasonable for the manager. So a manager perhaps may be able to deal with 20, let's say. In a flat organisation, that would be quite straightforward. In a tall organisation, the manager may have to deal with, as I said earlier, perhaps 100, 150. If that organisation was flat, well, managers can't do that. So it is possible, it is absolutely essential to have a tall organisation in that case, to have different layers. But the layers, the number of layers within the organisation should also be controlled. Otherwise, communications from the top down becomes complex. So there is a real issue in designing the optimal structure of the business, which is really a trade-off between the number of layers of management versus the span of control for each individual manager. Tall structures have more divisions, more departments, and more rules, and all this emerges from the efficiency requirements of large organizations. That's, I think, all we need to say about large organizations and about tall and flat organizations as well. That's the reference I mentioned earlier on, the main reference, and I think this is a topic that will raise its head in seminars and in many other areas, and is an important topic in considering organizational structure. So I advise you to go back over the slides on here, stop the video, make your own notes, do some research, pad out your notes, and be prepared to answer questions on the advantages and disadvantages, in particular of tall and flat organizations. But this concludes the video, so thank you for watching.